and you say, okay, I'm just going to do the next thing that's right in front of me, and I'm going to do my best, or I'm going to attempt to do my best, and then I'm open to receiving whatever is coming my way, whether it's good, bad, stressful, hard, because all of those things shape us.
The more present that you can be, the more sensitive you are to those either those subtle signs or those subtle shifts internally that can tell you, yeah, keep going, or maybe it's time to not totally change directions, but maybe pivot in a way.
Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the Live Well Lifestyle podcast, where we believe true transformation comes from the inside out. My name is Ignacio Anzaldo. This lovely human in front of me, he's Travis Gibson, and I just want to lead with gratitude. We're so grateful to be doing this, to being led by inspiration and taking action. It's something that we've wanted to do for a long time, and there's something that has been on my mind for a while lately, and it's something that feels so obvious when you're thinking about it, but when you're not, it just can escape your life, and you can be left wondering what is happening, what's going on, and but when you're present in it, when you're feeling it, it just makes life feel a lot more simple, at least in my perspective, and that is um, surrender. Travis, what's your experience with surrender? I know we've talked about it for over a decade. It's something that's changed our lives in a lot of ways. I want to hear what you have to say.
Uh, it is fun. The thing that you said was really relatable, actually, where when you're aware of it, it makes sense and it's like calming, right? But when you're kind of lose track of it and you're going through life or chasing goals was really kind of the biggest thing where that had the most, or its absence had the biggest effect on me. Because there's a difference with, I mean, the way you feel internally of going towards your vision for your life and having a goal and doing it in a state of tension versus doing it in a state of everything is going to work out. And I think it, not only for your own perspective, it makes you feel a lot better in the process, but I think being in that state allows you to see synchronicities a whole lot more. I mean, with some people that, I mean, I always enjoy listening to like people talk about law of attraction and stuff like that and manifestation. And in when it comes to those topics and ideas around those topics, the synchronicities are secondary to the alignment, like being in surrender and being in a good state and allowing things to come to you rather than being in tension, which is kind of like a repulsive force in a way, because you're just wanting and desiring, and that just shows that you're in lack. You don't have the thing that you want. And so whether it's one or the other, I'm not sure, but one thing I do know for sure is if you are more aware and you can see those things more often, then they are occurring more often. Obviously, if they were occurring at the same rate, you're just so busy in your mind, feeling like you have to do it yourself. And what do I have to do next? And learn all these things. You could, they could have been just as common and just as present. You just missed them
Yeah.
because you're so busy in your head.
It's interesting that you call it, you referenced it multiple times, a state, and I think like a state of mind. And I think that's fascinating because most people wouldn't associate a state of mind to surrender. I feel like it's almost surrender's almost taboo without people really knowing it's taboo because surrender feels like defeat before you know what it really is. And I mean, we've talked about it multiple times, and let me know if this still rings true. But surrender, that state of mind being where you feel like, okay, let's simplify this. What is happening in my life right now? What do I have control of? And that question right there, I feel like is pretty eye-opening most of the time because you realize you don't have that much control of anything. You have control of your thoughts and to a certain degree your actions and your reactions, but I think we always have the ability to surrender intentionally. And that's where I like that you called it a state of mind because it really is. You have to practice that surrender. You have to practice giving it up to something bigger, something greater, something that you can't control, and having faith that if you stand there strong, you're not standing there defeated. You stand there strong and you say, okay, I'm just going to do the next thing that's right in front of me, and I'm going to do my best, or I'm going to attempt to do my best, and then I'm open to receiving whatever is coming my way. Whether it's good, bad, stressful, hard, because all of those things shape us. I feel like some people, even myself, definitely myself, we get caught up in, okay, what's the next good thing that's going to come? Even though we've been through this so many times where adversity definitely is a refining tool that helps sharpen us in ways that we couldn't get anywhere else. I mean, what I want to hear your perspective of state of mind because you brought that up a few times, and it's the first time I've ever heard you say it that way. And I just want to kind of dig into your brain a little bit and figure out what have you learned over this decade plus of time about surrender in your life?
I think, and I guess in the sense that I was referring to is more of a physical state, actually. There's a state of
Got it.
mind, of course, and that is part of it. But in my mind, the way that I was, exploring it or expressing that was the emotional state because of the tension. And it starts in the mind. It starts as a mental state, but the trickle down effect is a feeling state. So it's both, but I guess the feeling state was more what I was thinking in my mind because of the what I said about something, one path being full of tension while another path is kind of open to possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I knew how to do it, I would have done it already, but I don't, so I'm figuring it out, which means that my experience, my mind, my brain doesn't have all the answers. So I'm better off by taking the next step, like you're talking about, and being open to the opportunities that are coming, whether something feels initially positive or negative. When you're on the path, they're all positive. Because even if something doesn't work out, it's you can pinball your way through life towards success. Because even those failures, as long as you don't quit, you just bounce off and you go to a different direction. So there is misdirection, and then maybe there's something that jumps you forward, kind of like chutes and ladders. You hit a ladder and you just fucking slide down.
Yeah.
You skip a couple turns. So the synchronicities are like hitting the ladders.
Mm-hmm.
And then me feeling like I have to figure out what to do and do all these things and work harder is like going the long way in my mind. Now it doesn't mean that you just can sit there and think your way through it, but
Right.
I think the efficiency can be better when you're just doing what you can when you can, and then leveraging consistency and a little bit of luck, which I think everybody would agree plays a part, and those are the synchronicities. But I think if you're always looking for where the negatives are or trying to avoid the negatives, you're kind of steering yourself right at them.
Right.
But with the surrender, it's you're just welcoming everything. Like there's nothing to avoid necessarily. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off yourself, not only in the having to figure it out, but just realizing that's just part, that's just that's just part of the journey. And you
Well,
learn more that way.
it's interesting that you say that because we've talked about it multiple times where you're committing to something. So in a way, you're quietly committing to anything that comes your way, that you'll at least give it a chance, which is interesting because, and I'll let you take over, but you were telling me a story the other day about somebody doing a backflip, and it, you have to be well committed before you do that action, or else the whole entire way you're getting in your head about doing that specific action. You have to commit way before the actual action is done. Do you mind sharing that story? Because I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it was, and again, when you think about these different fields, the people who are the best at them, that are the most successful in these different fields, usually they have a way of looking at the world that's just totally different from everyone else, obviously. And I grew up riding dirt bikes and motorcycles, so I was really into the motocross stuff and Travis Pastrana, and he was just the best, you know.
Yeah.
He just seemed like a good person and just had fun in life, you know. And he's really young and he's so messed up from all the bones that he's broken. And one of the other things I saw, he was trying this just crazy trick, and it has been years since I've even looked at stuff like that, so it just kind of happened. And the kinds of things people are doing now are just totally different from when I was a kid and the tricks that people were trying, you know? And so when it comes to that state of commitment, like you're talking about, that's one in which is totally foreign to me because your state of commitment is realizing on the extreme, which is possible, I could die doing this right now, kind of like these big wave surfers.
Hmm.
They've just they just know that they could die, but they've accepted it a long time ago. So it's really, I mean, that allows them to put them in the state to be the highest performer as possible because they're not worried about the worst case scenario because they've already sat with it. They've already accepted it.
Yeah, they're on borrowed time.
So it is what it is. But then being in that state allows them to, in some cases, probably partake in one of the most magical experience I can never imagine. I would imagine riding a wave has probably got to be, I mean, you know that more
Yeah.
than me, but it's probably got to be a pretty magical experience. But then to scale that to this could be the most magical experience or the end of my experience as a human. Like that's a pretty that the contrast of that moment has got to be pretty there are probably few that beat it. But again, it starts with they've already made up their mind. And I that's something that I've started doing over the past 5 years, I guess, or if there's something that's really challenging or difficult that I know is going to take a long time, it seems like I take even longer before I even start because I'm
Mm.
really thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be a lot harder than I think it is now because I know when you get halfway through, there's going to be things that come up. And so the more I go through all these different nuances of how difficult it's going to be, and if I can still tell myself, yeah, it's worth it, you got to do it, then it's kind of once those things come up, I just know, well, this is what I agreed to. So what's going to be the positive from it? What am I learning from this, which actually makes everything productive?
Yeah. How do you feel like you've figured out the surrender hack in in your life? I want to start with because I'm just genuinely curious. In fitness and in your profession, where does that play a part? Where does surrender? Because I think personally, I believe that you just went through a pretty defining chapter of surrender and your mind changed about what you were doing in terms of your day to day of your profession. Because I think before you were in a state of mind and emotion and maybe even a little physical of this is not what I expected it to be. And almost, I mean, from my perspective, almost being a little pissed off, rightfully so, because you did so much school. You went through so much school to where, yeah, you get to that place and you're like, this is it? This is what I'm doing. Do you mind sharing about that a little bit?
That's something I'm still working on, but
Yeah.
it has gotten better. But I think with fitness, that's an easier question because it's just been so long that I don't even think about it. It's just
Yeah.
part, even days that I don't want to, it seems like I naturally end up finding myself on the way.
Yeah, you're already committed.
Yeah. So it's not, it
Before.
doesn't take any extra effort, and even going and pushing yourself doesn't feel like I have to muster up all this, motivation or anything else, to do it, which I'm sure you can relate in because you've always been a hard worker as well and got up early and drove long distances to go to work and all these things. And it's not as if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, it's
So, I mean,
just a part of the program.
well, yeah. And I think that's one thing that I always thought was interesting with you as well is in terms of, career success and financial success, you're only in the position that you're in now because at the time you left a job that you were making the most money that you had at the time, which
Hmm.
isn't much compared to now, which is funny when you think back on it. But at the time you were stoked on it and
Yeah.
happy with it. But then you had to let that go, which probably seemed like a maybe a crazy decision. And that
Looking
was the
back,
whole that
go
was the
ahead.
whole
Sorry.
path of that was a whole path of learning to surrender, whether you had learned it yet or not.
Yeah. Yeah, looking back on life, I realized I just, and that's the thing, maybe that's the theme, is you overcommit to whatever is about to happen, regardless of knowing what it is, what's coming your way. I think it's overcommitting to faith, having faith that it's all going to work out and just taking a leap of faith. That's probably why they call it a leap of faith. But I've done it so much in my life that I feel like I did it accidentally on purpose. It's a habit that I created long ago that just sometimes looking back, I'm like, man, I'm so weird for just needing some sort of change and looking for more. And I guess always asking the question that there's got to be more. And I don't mean that in a way that is talking about vanity or, I feel like I always push the limits with myself on the inside, whether it's good or bad. But then the defining moment always comes when the adversity comes in my life. It's always met with something a little bit against the grain or something that's positive, but the against the grain is where I tend to learn. That's kind of my favorite place in life, actually, because you're forced to make a decision, you're forced to surrender, you're forced to push your limits. I mean, you could do so many different things when you're in that realm, in that space. And one of the biggest things for me lately has been a father and a husband. It's just you're constantly reminded that you're not in control. And in a good way, I mean, it's interesting what your perception and your idea of being a father is going to be, and then what it actually is. Even the concept of knowing that I wanted to be a father and a husband pretty much my entire life, knowing I come from a Mexican background, so my dad was the provider, my mom took care of us, knowing that I wanted to be the provider, and especially financially in today's world, and actually coming to the realization that it wasn't anything that I thought it would be. I had to untangle the beliefs that I had around most of the beliefs that I had. And I think a lot of that comes with surrender. It's just saying, wow, I just I overshot this in so many ways. And I think we've talked about this before, and I think it'll be a common theme with our conversations, but I was too focused on the destination and not present in the journey. And so I didn't really learn everything that I needed to learn. But again, I think when I was met with adversity, it just hit me differently. So I'm in this position now, being a father of three, being a husband, and I love every day. Every day is just a new learning opportunity. Some days are harder, some days are easier. But when you have an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old, you're met with a lot of situations where you're like, there's not even a fighting chance that I have any control in this. I just have to let it be and trust my gut in a lot of scenarios, but mostly be open to the outcome. And a lot of the times the kids figure it out on their own, which is a really beautiful thing to watch, um, because you meet them where they're at, you meet the situation where it's at, and you learn from it. I think it's a big part of an action item that comes from surrender is you're an observer and you get to pick lessons away from the things that are happening in front of you.
Do you feel like your motivation then that you referred to, like that was related to your father about being a provider, was your desire to, have a good job or be stable financially was so that you could be a father and a good father and a good husband, or were you thinking about that at the time?
I think it changed, and I think that happens in life. I think your motivation changes at that time when I was really committing to that idea. It definitely led with wanting to be a father, wanting to be a husband. Then when I realized, okay, people my age don't really think like that, especially in their early 20s, it shifted a little more to I want to retire my parents for everything that they did for me and the sacrifices that they made by moving to this country because I could very easily be in the middle of Mexico on a tiny little ranch instead of being where I'm at. And I took that very seriously. And but then it reverted back to being a father and being a husband when number one, I realized that the retiring my parents was a prophecy for myself, not for them. They didn't want to be retired. They don't need to be retired. They're happy doing what they're doing. So surrendering to that realization was challenging a bit, I think, to my ego because I wanted my dad to be proud. I wanted my parents to be proud of me retiring them or attempting to retire them. And I was always faced with, oh, you don't need to do that, mijo. Like, you, that's silly. It was just a lot of, they just were making it very clear that that's not something that they expected or wanted, especially at the time. My parents are young. So they're like, what would I do if I retired right now? They're very self-sufficient. So I think for me, I was always trying to create scenarios where I could chase something, like we were talking about earlier. And I don't think that's the greatest thing. I think being quiet for some time letting things come to you, understanding what feeds you spiritually and feeds you emotionally, and something that you can find happiness with, because I think you find happiness in things when you let them be what they are and you accept them for what they are. And it's more of like riding a wave than doing a uphill trek where you're fighting against gravity and fighting against falling rocks and shamble and grip and all these things. I think life feels more fluid when you surrender and you take things for what they are and you ask the question of what does this feel like right now? What is this meant to be? How do I feel about this? I think it's all about asking questions in life. It's all about figuring out where you stand with whatever's in front of you. I don't know what you think. I'd be very curious to hear.
Well, do you feel like that was kind of a funny moment for you because then you lost your motivation, where
Yeah.
part of it was about your parents, but really it was about you. Like you wanted to feel good about doing that. You wanted to have this drive that was exciting enough that would propel you to become financially self-sufficient and successful and all these things. And then when they say, well, that we don't want that, and then it's kind of like, well, what am I supposed to
Yeah. Yeah, I
supposed
mean,
to do now?
honestly, it was a really humbling moment. It was hard in many different ways because I just didn't know what to do from there. It was a season of, well, shit, what do I do now? You know, I've had I've put all my eggs in one basket. But again, that's the theme of my life. I put all my eggs in one basket and just go for it until it's not working out. But I think, yeah, it was hard, but I also I think in life I've learned to surrender when things get hard. I think that's the only other option. I can be in my mind all day long, and then when I realize, okay, this is out of my control, I pretty quickly turn to surrender and go, what do I need to do? What's the universe telling me? What's God telling me? What's around me right now?
Right.
I think there's always signs around you telling you what direction you need to head in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that also goes back to the more the more present that you can be, the more sensitive you are to those either those subtle signs or those subtle shifts internally that can tell you, yeah, keep going, or maybe it's time to not totally change directions, but maybe pivot in a way.
Hmm. What this week on this topic or the last month have you felt like has been hard for you to come to this point of surrender? And then what's been easy for you if you can, because I feel like it's much easier to connect the dots looking back than it is when you're in the moment trying to connect them moving forward.
Well, overall, it's gotten much easier, and I feel the benefits of being aware of that now and practicing. But I had this realization a little while ago, maybe over a month ago, that I mean, to get something new, or like if you're trying to create a new life, you have to let go of the old, and that could be scary. And going like back to this, when we're talking about um, making videos and just expressing yourself and putting it out there, it could be a scary thing. And I would assume a lot of people can relate to the fact of, well, what if people judge me? And what if people
Mm,
think it's dumb or stupid or whatever? And so I came to this realization, well, if that's the case, and say all my friends saw it and thought that it was dumb or stupid or didn't want to be friends with me anymore, that means I have to let them go, because it's either I keep that old version and not grow into a new version, or you have to be okay with the new version shedding all of these other factors of your life. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, definitely not. But there is that instinctual subconscious, fear of being judged. And of course, some people will, but at the extreme end, if that means that I'm going to have to get a whole new set of friends because this is where my life is going, if I genuinely feel like this is my purpose and this is my path and it's what I'm supposed to do, then you have to be okay with the results of that. And in a way, again, when you look at it as a lesson, it's just opening up more opportunities. It's not losing out on old, because now imagine all the new people that are going to be brought in your life that are going to be more in alignment with what you believe and feel now, rather than friends that you're kind of forced to be with because you grew up in the same vicinity of 5 square miles or whatever it is. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
have choice within those 5 miles, but you're kind of forced to be friends with the people you're around when you're growing up or in school or at work.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's that little voice inside your head saying, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if, what if I look stupid? What if this fails? What if I'm not good at it?
Right.
Yeah. That's an interesting one to surrender to because it's it's hard to do that when it's in your head. Yeah. I'm on the same page with you, though. I feel like we want to do it for the right reasons. And I think that's something that we've talked about a lot. And but doesn't it feel good when it feels like the right time and it feels like the right thing? Because I think that's where we're at, is we're trying to lead with our hearts, and we have surrendered through this process. Our goal is to help people and also help ourselves in the sense that we get to have these deeper conversations and grow with each other and try to understand where we're at a little bit more, or try to realize that there is no understanding of where we're at, and to let whatever's supposed to happen happen. I think that's, I don't know, for me personally, it feels like I'm where I'm supposed to be right now, which is a great feeling.
It takes the pressure off.
Yeah, yeah, in a lot of ways. For me personally, I think where I've noticed it has been in work. I think a lot of times I'm on the phone a lot, and a lot of the times, especially when things change a little and it gets a little harder, just on a macro level, because I'm in the people business. So a lot of people are reactive. And so whenever I get a phone call that I know isn't going to be fun, or whenever I have to make a phone call that I know isn't going to be fun, I used to get so stressed out and pent up about how do I relay this in a way that is not too scary or alarming, or something that's going to cause discomfort to my client, to the other person involved in this, to the other people involved in this. And I think it's way less about that. And that's something that I've realized. It's not how am I going to relay this? It's how can I be present for this person? Because oftentimes in what I do, that is whatever's happening with them, and this transaction or situation is the biggest thing that's happening in their life. And for me, it's just another day. So I've tried to focus more on being a conduit to allowing them to surrender in a way. To I just ask questions and try to be there for them when they're going through a hard time, and then reassure them that we'll get through it. You know, it may be rocky, may not be the easiest thing in the world, or it may be much easier than we anticipated, but I'm here. I'm here to help. We're gonna get through it. And that's something where it's made it a lot easier to make those calls or to be a recipient of those calls, especially when when I don't want to be. You know, I think we all want to have good news for people all the time, and that's just not the reality of life.
I agree. No, that's great.
Well, I think we're running out of time, so I just wanted to end with how grateful I am for you, Travis, and to have these conversations. I think this topic is near and dear to our hearts, and I hope that it can help somebody who's watching, or, I think at the end of the day it helps us. It helps us grow and learn and forge forge the path ahead.
I agree, and I'm grateful as well, and I really appreciate, the fact that I mean that we're doing this now, even the fact that we, stayed in contact for as long as we did. But like you said before, I think the timing is a lot, and feeling like what you're doing at the right time is it's a good feeling.
Yep, I agree.
Yep, grateful for you too.
All right, Trav, until next time.
All right, man. Take it easy. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Love you.